The great academy stood tall in the middle of the alien city, and its halls were filled with many voices from many worlds as young cadets from every corner of the galaxy gathered there to learn and to prove themselves worthy of the Council of Stars, and among them sat one human, who looked small compared to the towering forms of his classmates, but whose eyes carried a fire that none of them could see yet. The teacher walked to the center of the training ground and raised his long hand high, and silence spread across the room as every cadet waited for his words, and he said, "Today you will face a test of mind and skill, not of strength or speed. You will each build a trap, and by sunset the traps will be tested in the open field, and only those who can capture a living creature will pass." At once the room filled with energy as alien cadets hurried to their workstations, where strange metals and glowing tools were stacked in perfect order, and they began to shape nets of light, and cages of crystal, and walls of shifting energy, and every one of them believed they would pass with honor, for they trusted in their advanced machines. But the human student had nothing but a small corner of the room where discarded scraps were piled high, and broken pieces of equipment lay rusting with age, and the only thing he could find that still held together was an old dented trash can with a bent lid and cracked handles, and when he pulled it free the aliens laughed loud enough to shake the walls. One cadet with silver skin said, "Look at the human, he does not even know how to build, he only plays with garbage," and another with wings of glass said, "This is why Earth is called a trash world, for their kind are weak and small, and they think they can fight with junk," and the laughter grew and rolled like thunder across the hall. The human did not answer their words, he only placed a trash can on the table, and began to study the broken parts around him, wires and gears, and splinters of wood, and the remains of a shattered tool, and while the others mocked he worked in silence, his hands moving quick and steady like he had done this before in another life, where no one was watching. The teacher said nothing as he walked between the rows of shining devices and broken scraps, his long eyes resting for a moment on the human, and then moving on, but a shadow of curiosity passed over his face, for he had seen many strange things in this galaxy, yet the calm of the human made him pause. Hours passed, and the alien students shaped their traps into glowing cages that shimmered with power, and into nets that hummed with force, while the human kept his eyes on the old can and the pile of wires, and slowly tied them together until the shape began to take form, a shape that looked weak, but held a hidden strength. The sun began to sink outside, and golden light poured through the high windows of the academy, and the teacher raised his hand again and called the students to finish their work before the shadow of night touched the ground, and one by one the aliens stepped back from their machines, proud and sure of victory, while the human wiped the dirt from his hands and pushed the dented can to the edge of the table with a quiet smile. The aliens burst into laughter once more, pointing with sharp fingers and cruel voices, saying, "Look, he brings nothing but trash to the test, and what beast will ever be caught in such a poor design, and how foolish the humans are to think they belong in this academy." The teacher raised his hand for silence and said, "Tomorrow at sunset the traps will be tested in the field, and there will be no mercy for failure, and those who cannot capture will be cast out of this class and into the shadows of shame." The aliens stood tall and confident, their glowing devices shining like jewels under the fading light, but the human stood alone with a can of trash and wires that looked too weak to hold even a child, and yet his eyes carried no fear, only patience, and a strange calm that made even the strongest alien pause. As the last light of day faded, the human tightened the final wire and placed the lid of the can down with care, and the sound echoed through the silent hall like a drumbeat of warning. And for a moment the laughter of the aliens faltered as they saw a look on the human face. They could not understand, a look that promised the test tomorrow would not end as they expected. And when the teacher dismissed the class, the aliens walked out with pride, while the human lingered behind, touching the edge of the trash can once more, as if it was not trash at all, but a secret waiting to be revealed. And the night closed around the academy, while somewhere in the shadows a new story of humanity was about to begin. The morning sun rose high over the alien academy, and light fell across the stone floor of the training ground where the cadets were gathered again, each one standing proudly near the trap they had built the night before their alien eyes, shining with pride and with certainty that today they would show the galaxy their skill, while one human stood quietly near a dented trash can covered with wires and bent metal scraps that looked ready to fall apart. The teacher walked into the circle of students, his tall form casting a shadow over them, and his long cloak trailing across the ground like a river of black. He spoke with a deep voice that carried to every corner of the hall. Today the traps will be tested, and only the clever will pass. And he raised his long finger to the sky, as if calling down judgment itself. The alien students looked at one another with confident grins, and then turned their eyes toward the human standing alone near his pile of broken pieces, and they began to whisper loud enough for all to hear. And one said, "Look at the Earth Child, he stands with garbage, while we stand with light and crystal." And another said, "His kind is weak and dirty, and his world is nothing but stone and trash, and his trap will fail before the first creature even takes a step." And their laughter grew so loud it shook the beams of the academy ceiling. The human stayed silent, his face calm, his hands folded behind his back, his eyes steady like deep water that never moves, while the aliens pointed and mocked him, and their words cut sharp as knives. But still he did not answer, and that made them laugh even harder, because to them silence was weakness and quiet was surrender. One alien with tall horns and shining blue armor spread his arms wide and called to the others, "Behold the mighty human who builds a trap from the waste of our hands, and tomorrow he will be thrown from this academy back to his trash world where he belongs." And the hall filled again with cruel voices that rose and fell like storm winds in the night. The teacher raised his hand for silence, but even he could not stop the sneers and the mocking looks that filled the air, and his own eyes lingered on the trash can, and he thought to himself that perhaps the laughter was fair, yet there was something in the way the human stood so still that held a weight he could not name, and so he said nothing. Around the circle alien traps stood tall, and bright one pulsed with living crystal that grew sharp claws at the edges, ready to snap shut around any creature that drew near. Another shimmered with beams of energy, humming with a power that burned the eyes to look upon it, and still another floated above the ground, spinning like a wheel of fire, waiting to strike like lightning when prey came close. And the cadets held their heads high, for they trusted the strength of their machines. The human trap sat low and ugly, no shine, no glow, no sound, only an old dented can with wires that twisted around its sides, and a lid that rested loose, as if ready to fall apart. And every time the cadets looked at it they laughed again, because to them beauty meant strength and shine meant power, and this poor thing had neither. But the human bent down on one knee and checked the wires with quiet care, his fingers moving like he knew each piece by heart, and though his trap looked weak, there was a rhythm to his work like music too soft to hear. And the teacher saw this and narrowed his eyes, for he had trained many cadets, and he knew the look of one who trusted not in chance, but in design. The day passed in waiting, and the cadets grew restless. They sharpened their claws and their tools, they polished their traps, and whispered plans to one another, while the human sat on the ground near his kin, his back against the wall, his eyes half closed as if in rest, yet his mind sharp like the edge of a hidden blade. At last a call came from the high bell of the academy tower, and the teacher spoke again with a voice like iron. "It is time. Take your traps to the field and prove your worth, for the creatures are ready, and they will not be kind to those who fail." And the gates opened, and the cadets carried their traps into the wide field beyond the walls, where the grass was tall and the shadows deep. The aliens moved with excitement, their traps glowing brighter under the sun, and each one laughed again at the sight of the human dragging a dented can across the earth, the sound of metal scraping stone ringing out like a broken bell. And one alien shouted from behind, "Careful, human, or the great predator will laugh itself to death before it even reaches you." And again their voices shook the air. But the human kept walking slow and steady, his eyes scanning the field, his hands never letting go of the wires that trailed from his can. And though the aliens mocked him, he did not turn once to answer their words, for he had learned long ago that laughter means nothing when silence holds the truth. They reached the center of the field, where cages stood ready to release the test creatures, and the teacher raised his hand once more and said, "When the sun reaches the red stone on the hill, the gates will open, and the hunt will begin, and those who catch will pass, and those who fail will leave this place in shame." And he lowered his hand, and silence fell heavy like a weight upon them all. The aliens whispered among themselves about how quickly the human would fail, about how weak his trap looked, about how they would celebrate his shame before night fell, and each whisper made their laughter grow once more until it filled the field with sound. But as they laughed, they did not see the human press his hand against the dented lid of his can, his eyes sharp and watching every shadow as if he was waiting for something none of them could see. The teacher looked at the human one last time before the gates opened, and he felt a strange unease in his chest, though he did not know why, for everything before him told him the human would fail. Yet the calm in those eyes spoke of another story, waiting to be told, a story that no alien laughter could silence. And as the sun touched the red stone on the hill, the teacher gave the signal, and the gates began to open, and creatures of claw and fang and strange hunger poured out into the field, their cries echoing like thunder, while alien traps began to hum and glow with deadly power. And in that moment the laughter of the aliens faded into a tight silence, for now the true test had begun, and only the traps would speak the truth of who would pass and who would fall. The gates of the academy field opened wide, and from the darkness inside rushed creatures the students had never seen before, beasts bred for cunning and strength, their bodies covered in scales, fur, or plates of bone, their eyes glowing with hunger and fury, the air filled with roars and screeches as claws tore at the ground and wings beat against the sky, shaking dust across the field. The cadets gripped their traps with pride and fear, for this was the moment they had waited for. The teacher raised his arm and called out, "Let the trial begin," and at once the alien students sprang into action, their traps unfolding like flowers of light, and fire nets of energy burst to life, and cages of crystal spread wide, jaws of living stone snapped shut as cadets shouted in triumph, and each one believed their creation would succeed. Yet the field was chaos, and the creatures were clever, dodging beams and slipping through nets, breaking cages with wild strength. One alien trap glowed with fire as a net of burning strands closed around a leaping beast, but in the next breath the creature rolled and tore through the net with its sharp tusks, leaving sparks across the sky. The cadet who built it cried out in shock and pulled at the controls, but the machine whined and broke apart in his hands. Another alien tried to use a cage of light that dropped from above, but the creature inside split the bars with a single twist of muscle, and the cage shattered into glowing dust. All around the field the alien traps failed one after another, their advanced designs shining bright, but breaking under the pressure of wild instinct. The cadets shouted in anger, some in fear, their pride slipping away as the beasts ran free across the grass, and the air filled with the scent of panic. The humans stood apart, watching the chaos unfold as dented trash can hidden low among the tall grass wires stretched from its rim to small anchors pressed deep into the soil, his hand steady as he adjusted the tension on each wire, his eyes calm as if he had been waiting for this exact moment since the night before. He whispered no word. He moved with patience, like a hunter in the shadows. The first creature ran past him, its body long and covered with black scales, its mouth lined with rows of jagged teeth. It moved fast, leaping over traps that glowed with deadly energy and leaving broken shards of alien tech behind. Yet as it landed, its foot pressed against one of the wires hidden in the grass, and in a flash the lid of the trash can sprang shut with a metallic snap, the sound sharp and final. The creature whipped around, thrashing, but the mechanism held tight. The can rattled, yet did not break. The aliens froze in silence, eyes wide as they watched the human trap hold a beast that had slipped through every glowing cage and net in the field. The cadets whispered to each other, how could such junk work when their shining machines had failed? One cadet hissed, "It is chance, it cannot hold." Another shook his head, saying, "No, this is design, this is timing." The teacher lifted his chin, his long eyes narrowing as he studied the human trap. The simple can, the bent lid, the twisted wires it should not have held, yet it did. And in his chest he felt again that strange unease. The human was not playing with scraps, he was shaping victory from the ground itself. More creatures poured across the field, wings beating, claws cutting through the grass. Alien traps hummed and burned, but each one fell short. Nets missed, cages shattered, beams scattered, but the human trap stayed steady, its wires hidden, its design simple and sharp. When another beast lunged forward, its paw pressed the trigger again, and the lid snapped shut like the jaws of a predator. The creature howled, but it was caught, and the aliens gasped. The laughter from the day before had gone. No one laughed now. Their eyes followed every movement of a human, as if trying to see the secret behind his trash. Can, one cadet whispered, "How can this be?" Another whispered, "What else can he catch?" And another said softly, "Perhaps humans are not weak as we thought." The human did not look at them. He kept his gaze on the beast, scanning the field, adjusting the wires with calm precision. He knew his trap was no miracle. It was simple mechanics, the pull of weight, the snap of tension, the strength of timing. Yet He also knew no one here understood the mind behind it, the patience, the quiet thought that turned garbage into a weapon. The creatures roared and leapt across the field, scattering the cadets. Some fled as their traps broke, others stood frozen in shame as their machines sparked and fell silent. The human kept working as though nothing outside mattered. Each wire reset, each lid checked, each sound of metal against metal telling him the trap was alive and ready. The teacher finally spoke, his voice low but clear enough for all to hear. The trap of the human has succeeded more than once, while many of yours have failed. This is no accident, this is not luck, this is mind. And the field fell silent as every cadet turned toward the human standing alone near his battered can. One creature larger than the rest, a beast with long horns and glowing red eyes, stormed across the ground, crushing smaller traps under its weight. Cadets screamed and scattered. The beast roared, shaking the field. The human tightened his grip on the final wire and crouched low, waiting. The creature stepped closer, its heavy foot pressing the soil. The wire snapped, the lid sprang down, the can rattled hard but locked shut, and the beast thrashed yet could not break free. The cadets stared in disbelief. One by one their pride crumbled, and their laughter turned to fear. No alien voice mocked the human, now no alien sneer remained. They watched as his simple design caught again and again, while theirs lay broken across the ground. The human lifted his head, his eyes sharp, not proud, not boastful, only calm, and in that calm the aliens saw something they had never seen before, the quiet will of a species that had lived too long in struggle to fail when it mattered most. The teacher raised both hands and declared the round complete, his voice echoing across the field. The traps have spoken and the creatures have chosen, and today we see who understands the heart of a hunter and who does not. And as his words faded, the aliens stood silent, their faces pale, while the human stood steady beside a dented trash can that had become the most feared trap of the day. The sun sank lower, casting long shadows across the broken machines and the captured beasts, the air heavy with the scent of dust and sweat. The cadets carried their ruined traps back to the academy, but their eyes never left the human, for in their hearts they knew this test was only the beginning, and the quiet child of Earth had shown them something they could not yet explain, a secret that would change the way they looked at humans forever. The field of the academy was still shaking from the roars of beasts and the sounds of broken machines. The cadets stood scattered, some with hands over their heads, some shouting at their traps to work again, but none of their proud designs could hold the creatures for more than a breath. The shining nets lay torn across the grass, the cages of crystal shattered like glass under a hammer, and beams of energy flickered out like dying fireflies. The pride of the alien cadets was gone, leaving only fear and shame in the dust. The human stood in the middle of the chaos, his dented can steady on the soil, wires stretched tight across the grass, his face calm, his eyes sharp as he tracked the movements of the beasts. The air smelled of sweat and smoke, the sound of claws cutting earth filled the field, and still the human moved with patience, waiting, not rushing, never raising his voice, his hands guiding the trap with care. The first creature came close, a beast the size of a heavy horse, its body covered with fur black as night, its mouth lined with sharp white teeth, its breath steaming like fire. It had broken 3 alien cages already, and now it charged through the tall grass, eyes glowing red. The cadets cried out and pointed at it. Some said it will crush the human, some said it will flee now, but the human did not move. He crouched low, his hand resting on the wire stretched to the trash can, waiting with the patience of a hunter. The beast leapt forward, claws raised, and in that breath the human pulled the wire. The lid of the can snapped down with a sound that cracked through the field like thunder. The trap slammed tight on the beast's leg, pulling it off balance. The creature roared and twisted, thrashing in anger, but the mechanism held. The more it pulled, the deeper the lock grew, until the beast rolled in the grass, trapped and defeated. The cadets gasped, their voices breaking in shock. How could a can of trash hold what their machines could not? One cadet whispered, "This is impossible." Another muttered, "It must be trick or magic." But the teacher raised his hand and spoke loud enough for all the cadets to hear. "This is no trick. The creature is caught, and the human passes." Silence fell across the field, broken only by the sound of the beast struggling in the grass, and the human standing over it, calm and silent. The cadets, who had laughed the night before, now looked at him with fear in their eyes, because they saw something they had never believed possible. They saw human strength, not in shining metal, but in simple thought and patience and timing, and in the will to act when the moment was right. The second beast stormed across the ground, its body covered with bone plates, its back lined with spikes. It roared deep enough to shake the stones. It had smashed through 3 energy traps and left fire burning in its path. The cadets screamed and stepped back from it. None wanted to be near when it struck, yet the human only moved his wires again, his eyes following each step of the beast, waiting for it to reach the mark he had chosen. The creature stepped hard into the grass, pressing the soil down, and the trap sprang shut again, the lid clamping across its side. The beast bellowed, shaking the field, but the wires pulled tighter until the plates on its back snapped against each other. The cadets cried in shock again, their fear louder than their pride now. The teacher walked closer, his tall shadow falling across the human trap. He knelt and studied the design, his long fingers touching the bent metal and the twisted wires, and he said in a low voice, "This is not luck, this is craft." The weight of the lid, the snap of the wire, the timing of the release, every part built with thought. While the others built for beauty, you built for truth. And he looked at the human with eyes that no longer held doubt, but respect. The cadets tried to speak, but their voices trembled. One said, "His trap is ugly, it is dirt and garbage." But another cut him off and said, "It works better than all of ours together." And the truth of the words burned like fire in their hearts. The human bent to reset the lid, his hands moving fast and careful, his breath steady, as if he had done this 1,000 times before in some forgotten place on Earth, where survival meant using what was near, not what was beautiful. He knew what the others did not, that a trap was not about light or sound or pride. It was about silence. It was about waiting and about closing at the right time. Another creature leapt from the shadows, this one with wings sharp as knives, its body lean and fast. It had escaped every alien cage, darting through beams like smoke, and none could hold it. The cadets shouted in fear as it dived toward the human, but the wires were ready. The creature touched the ground with one claw, and the trap triggered. The lid slammed and caught the wing between its edges. The beast screamed and twisted, but it was caught. Its flight ended in the dust. The cadets stared, their eyes wide, their mouths open, no laughter, no pride left in them, now only disbelief. They whispered among themselves, could this be true? Was humanity stronger than they had thought, or had they been blind to what was right before them all along? The teacher raised his hand again and declared, "The human has done what none of you believed possible. He has caught 3, when most of you caught none. Remember this moment, for it will not be forgotten in the history of this academy." The human did not smile. He only reset the wires again, his calm face giving nothing away, his body still, his eyes sharp as always, because he knew the test was not over. More beasts waited, and the true trial was yet to come. But in his silence, the cadets saw a truth they could not deny. The human had turned trash into victory and silence into power. The sun sank lower in the sky, shadows stretching long across the field. The beasts still roared, and the cadets still struggled, their machines broken, their pride broken, while one human with a dented can stood steady like a stone in a storm. And though no one spoke it aloud, every cadet felt it in their hearts. The laughter that had filled the academy halls was gone, and in its place was fear and respect for the child of Earth who built a deadly trap from trash. The field was filled with the cries of beasts and the shouts of cadets as the test dragged on. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky with red fire and gold dust. The air shook with tension as the creatures stormed across the ground, crushing machines under their claws, while the human trap continued to spring with deadly timing. Every snap of the lid echoed like a drumbeat across the field, and every captured beast made the silence of the aliens heavier. The cadets stood broken, their glowing nets lay in heaps, their crystal cages shattered into pieces, their energy beams scattered into thin sparks that vanished in the wind. They had entered the trial with pride, certain that their shining designs would prove their worth, but now they looked at their hands and saw only failure, while one human with dirty fingers and simple wires stood tall beside a dented can of trash. The teacher walked slowly across the field, his long cloak dragging through the dust, his sharp eyes scanning every corner of the ground, and his voice cut through the noise like iron. He said, "Most of you have failed, though you had the strongest tools, though you had the brightest machines. You forgot the heart of a trap. It is not made to shine, it is made to wait. It is not built to be seen, it is built to strike unseen." And the cadets lowered their heads, for his words were truth. The human crouched low beside his trap again, his hand steady as he pulled the wires back into place, each movement calm, each touch precise. He did not look at the aliens, he did not speak to them. His focus was fixed on the grass, where shadows stretched long, and where more beasts moved like whispers in the dark. He knew the test was not finished. He knew the hardest part was still waiting. One beast with a long tail covered in blades came rushing through the tall grass, its body low, its speed fierce. It had cut through 5 alien traps in moments, leaving sparks and screams behind its tail whirled. Like a storm cutting the air, the cadets cried out to warn the human, but he was already watching his hand on the wire, his eyes sharp. The beast lunged, but the trash can lid slammed once more, locking on the tail. The blades struck the earth, but the trap held, and the beast fell thrashing in. Fury. The cadets gasped again, but this time there was no shock in their eyes, only fear, for they were beginning to understand the truth of what they were seeing. The human trap was not just luck, not just chance, it was something more. Each trigger set in silence, each wire placed with a mind that thought differently from theirs. The human was not playing the same game, he was changing it. The teacher crouched beside the captured beast, his long hand running over the locked wires, and he looked at the human and asked softly, "How did you learn this?" The human lifted his head and answered in a voice calm and low, "My people come from a world where we had nothing but what we could find. We learned to hunt with stone, we learned to fight with bone, we learned to build from scraps of fire and earth, and when we had no weapons we made them from whatever lay near. We are children of struggle, and we survive because we see what others throw away as useless and turn it into strength." The teacher nodded slowly, his eyes filled with thought, his voice heavy as he said, "Perhaps this is the hidden twist of this trial. Perhaps it was never about who had the most beautiful trap, but about who understood the truth of survival." And his words carried across the field, sinking into the hearts of every cadet who had mocked the human before. Another beast leapt into view, this one massive with scales of steel and eyes like molten fire. Its roar shook the ground, its breath burned the air. Every alien stepped back from it, their faces pale, for they knew none of their traps could stand against such a monster. Some even whispered that the test had gone too far, but the teacher gave no sign to stop. He wanted to see what would happen. The beast charged forward, breaking the earth under its claws, its eyes fixed on the human, standing calm in the middle of the field. The cadets shouted at him to flee, but he did not move. He stood with one hand resting on the final wire of his trap, his breath slow, his body steady. The beast came closer, its roar shaking the bones of everyone who heard it. Then the ground shifted under its weight, and the trash can trap triggered. The lid slammed down, but this time, instead of holding only one part of the beast, it snapped. A hidden chain of wires buried under the soil, and the earth itself gave way. A pit opened beneath the monster, pulling it down into darkness. The cadets cried out in shock, for they had not seen the wires stretching deeper into the ground. They had not seen that the trash can was not only a trap, but the heart of a larger design. The beast roared, thrashing in the pit, but it could not climb out. The walls collapsed around it, the wires pulled tight across its body. The trap had grown beyond its small form. It had become a weapon of the earth itself. The cadets stared with wide eyes, their fear now complete. They understood at last that the human had built not one trap, but many, all hidden, all waiting for the right moment. The teacher raised both hands, and his voice shook with power. He said, "Behold the truth of this trial. The human has turned trash into victory. He has turned weakness into strength, and he has shown you what you did not see. The heart of a hunter is not in the shine of his weapon, but in the silence of his mind." And his words fell like stones in the hearts of the cadets. The aliens lowered their heads, some in shame, some in respect. None dared to laugh now, for the laughter had died long ago, and in its place was a fear that cut deep. They had mocked the human, called him weak, called his world trash, but now they saw that trash had become the sharpest blade in the field. The sun sank lower, painting the sky with fire and shadow. The captured beasts howled from their cages. The broken traps lay silent in the dust, and the cadets walked back toward the academy, their steps heavy, their voices gone. The human stayed behind, resetting his wires one last time, his calm face giving nothing away, his eyes fixed on the horizon where the last light of day faded away. And as the teacher watched him, he thought to himself, "This is the hidden twist. The council wanted us to see. The others came here with pride, but the human came with silence, and from silence he built victory." And in that moment the teacher knew that nothing in the galaxy would ever laugh at humanity again. The sun sank lower beyond the hills, and the air over the academy field grew heavy with dust and the scent of beasts. The cadets stood in silence, their traps broken and useless, their pride shattered into pieces, scattered across the ground, while the human stood calm beside his dented trash can, his wires stretched across the soil, his face quiet and steady as if he had always known this day would end with silence, not with laughter. The teacher raised his voice again, his tone sharp as iron. He said, "The trial is not yet over. The final test remains. The strongest of the beasts has yet to appear, and only when it is captured will this trial be complete." The cadets shivered at his words, for they knew what he meant. There was one beast left in the cages. A predator whispered about in the halls of the academy, a creature no trap had ever held, a monster feared even by those who studied war and death. The gates at the far side of the field groaned open, and a roar like thunder poured out, shaking the stones under their feet. The ground trembled as the beast stepped forward, its body towering above the cadets, its scales glowing like molten rock, its eyes burning with red fire. Every step cracked the soil and sent dust swirling through the air. The cadets cried out in fear. Some stumbled back, some clutched their broken traps as if they could protect them, but the truth was written in their faces. None of them believed this beast could be stopped. The creature charged into the field, smashing through the remains of crystal cages, breaking the last glowing nets, tearing up the soil with claws sharp as blades. Its roar filled the sky, drowning every sound. Its power so great that even the teacher frowned, for he had not seen such force in many years, and in his heart he wondered if perhaps the human too would fail at last. The cadets turned to look at the human, expecting him to run, expecting him to tremble, but he did not move. He stood steady, his hand resting on the final wire, his eyes locked on the monster that came closer with each step, his breath calm, as if the world around him was not shaking with fury, but silent and waiting. He whispered no word, he raised no weapon, only watched and waited. The beast lunged forward, its claws tearing the air, its teeth wide open to crush anything in its path. The cadets screamed, telling the human to flee. But he did not flee. He crouched low, pulling the wire at the right moment, and the trash can trap snapped down. But instead of closing on the beast itself, it triggered a chain of hidden wires that stretched farther than anyone had seen before. The ground shook as the wires snapped tight, pulling at stakes buried deep, pulling at gears hidden under the soil. The earth cracked open like a wound, and a pit swallowed the beast, its massive body crashing down with a roar that shook the sky. Dust rose in clouds, and the cadets shielded their eyes as the monster thrashed below, its claws cutting at the walls, its body struggling to climb out. But the pit grew deeper, and the wires pulled tighter, dragging it down. The cadets gasped in disbelief, for this was not just a trap. It was something greater. The human had turned the entire ground into a weapon. His trash can had become the heart of a system no one had noticed the night before. Every wire, every gear, every scrap of metal hidden in the dirt, waiting for this one moment. The cadets whispered to each other, their voices trembling, "This is impossible. No one could build such a thing from scraps. No one but him." The teacher stepped forward, his cloak trailing in the dust, his eyes wide not with fear, but with respect. He saw the beast struggling in the pit, its roars echoing like thunder, yet unable to escape. And he spoke so all could hear. "The human has done what none of you believed possible. He has trapped the strongest creature with nothing but patience and thought, while your proud machine shattered before the weaker ones. This is the unexpected turn of this trial." The cadets bowed their heads, shame burned in their hearts, for they had mocked him, they had laughed at his trash, they had believed themselves above him. But now they saw the truth. The human had used no beauty, no glow, no shining crystal. He had used only what others had thrown away, and he had built something greater than all of them combined. The beast roared again, its claws tearing at the soil, its strength still terrible, but every movement made the wires pull tighter, every strike made the walls collapse deeper. And though it fought, the pit became its prison. The human never looked away, his hand steady on the wire, his eyes cold and sharp like stone. And in his silence, the cadets saw something they could not name, something that made them afraid, not of him, but of what humanity might become in time. The teacher lifted his hand, calling for silence, though silence already lay heavy across the field. His voice rolled over them like thunder. "Today, you have all seen what you did not expect. You thought the human would fail. You thought his world of scraps meant weakness. But he has turned scraps into victory. He has turned garbage into a weapon. You laughed at him, but the truth has laughed at you." The cadets felt the weight of his words. They remembered their laughter, the sneers and cruel jokes, the voices that had mocked the trash. They remembered calling Earth the world of garbage, a world unworthy of the stars. And now they knew those words would follow them forever as a mark of their blindness. The human reset the wires again, though the beast still struggled. He moved with the same patience as before, no rush, no panic, his body calm, his mind sharp, as if he had already seen this moment long before. The cadets whispered, He is not like us. He does not think like us. One said, he sees weapons where we see waste. Another said, he sees victory where we see failure. And another whispered softly, he sees the truth we missed. The beast finally collapsed inside the pit, its roars fading into silence, its eyes dimming with exhaustion, its body still massive and terrible, but its will broken. The wires held the soil, held the trap, held the cadets looked on in awe, their fear, now mixed with something new, respect. The teacher raised both arms, his voice loud, and final, the trial is complete. The strongest beast has fallen, and the one who brought it down is the human, who used nothing but scraps and silence. Let this be remembered in the history of this academy, and in the history of the stars. The cadets lowered their heads, some with shame, some with awe, and none dared to laugh again, for the laughter that had once filled the halls was gone forever. The human stood alone beside his dented trash, in his face, calm, his eyes sharp as silence, louder than any voice. And in that silence the aliens understood the unexpected turn had arrived. The galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. The field lay silent under the weight of twilight. The dust had settled, the roars of the beasts had faded, the cries of the cadets had died away. Only the sound of chains and wires straining under the weight of the captured monster remained. The human stood steady near his dented trash, his clothes covered in dirt, his hands marked by grease and wire, his eyes calm as the fire of the sinking sun burned across the horizon. The teacher walked into the center of the field, his long cloak dragging across the soil, his voice sharp and heavy. Every cadet, every creature, every stone seemed to lean toward his words. He said, the trial is finished. The traps have spoken. The truth is revealed today. You came with pride and beauty, but pride broke and beauty shattered. You came with light and power, but power failed. You mocked the one who came with nothing but scraps and patience. Yet his trap stands, his mind stands, his will stands. And now you know the truth. The cadets bowed their heads, their faces pale, their eyes filled with shame. They had mocked the human from the first moment they saw him. They had called him weak, called him child of trash world, and they had laughed as he built with broken pieces and bent wires. But now they stood in silence, because they had seen what their eyes did not believe before. They had seen garbage become a weapon. They had seen silence become strength. They had seen a human defeat what none of them could touch. The teacher turned to the human, his tall form casting a shadow across the dirt, his voice lower now, but sharp as steel. He said, speak, human. Tell us what we have not understood. Tell us what gave you victory when all around you fell. The human lifted his head, and his voice came out calm and steady. My people are born on a world of storms and fire. We have lived in hunger and fear. We have walked through wars and darkness. We had little, we had nothing, but we used what was near. We built with stone, we cut with bone, we fought with fire. We learned that weakness is only a word when the will refuses to break. The cadets listened, every word sinking like stone into their hearts. The human continued, we do not wait for perfect tools. We do not beg for beauty. We use what we have and make it enough. We see strength in scraps. We see weapons in waste. And when you laughed, we did not hear you, because laughter does not kill. Laughter does not capture. It only blinds the one who speaks it. The teacher nodded, his eyes narrow, his mouth set. He said, this is the lesson the council wanted you to learn. You thought the trial was about machines, but the trial was about mind. You thought the trial was about beauty, but the trial was about truth. And today truth belongs to the human. The cadets lifted their heads, and their eyes met the human at last, not with laughter, not with hate, but with respect. One spoke softly, saying, we did not know. Another whispered, we were blind. Another said, we called his world trash. But now I see it as a world of survivors, and their voices trembled with the weight of their shame. The captured beast roared once more from the pit, but its voice was weak, its body trapped, its strength broken. The wires of the human trap held steady. The cadets stared at it, then stared at the trash, dented and old, and they felt a cold fear inside, for they understood now that if such a small thing could defeat such a monster, then what else could humans build if given time? What else could they create if given reason? The human bent once more to check the wires, his hands moving with calm precision. He said, no trap is perfect, no trap is unbreakable, but the will to build again, the will to learn again, the will to strike again, that is what makes it work. That is what makes us endure. And as he spoke, the cadets felt the weight of a truth they had never known before. The teacher raised his hand, his voice ringing out across the field. Let this day be written in the stone of this academy. Let it be told in the halls of the council. Let it be remembered by every world that a human came with nothing and left with victory. That laughter was turned into silence, that silence was turned into power. The cadets stood and rose their broken traps beside them, their heads bowed, and one by one they stepped forward, placing their hands to their chests, the salute of respect, their voices low, as they spoke the old words of honor. We see your strength, we see your truth, we will not laugh again, and their voices carried across the fading light of the day. The human said nothing. He stood still, his face calm, his silence stronger than any words, and the cadets knew that his silence was not weakness, it was will. It was the quiet mind of a species that had learned through pain, that had endured storms and hunger, that had risen from fire and shadow, and they feared that silence, because they knew it would one day shape the stars. The teacher stepped closer, his eyes fixed on the human, and he spoke once more. Your people will be tested again in the years to come, and the galaxy will not welcome you with kindness. But if you carry this, if you carry this mind, then no power will break you, no laughter will stop you, no beauty will blind you, because survival belongs not to the proud, but to the patient. The night fell across the field. The stars came alive above their heads, shining down like eyes watching from the endless dark. The cadets carried their broken machines back to the halls, but their eyes never left the humans, some with fear, some with respect, some with both. And in their hearts they knew this trial was not just about one day in one academy, it was about the shape of the future. The human stood alone beside his dented trash can, his hands resting on the lid, his eyes on the stars, and in that moment he looked not like a student, not like a child, but like a shadow of what was to come, the quiet promise of a people who would one day rise from trash and dirt and storm to challenge the galaxy itself, and when that day came none would laugh again. The teacher turned back to the cadets, his voice the final word of the night. Today you saw the unexpected, you saw the hidden twist, you saw the truth. Now carry this lesson with you forever, for this is humanity's lesson, and if you forget it you will be broken by it. And his words echoed into the dark, carried by the wind, carried by the stars, carried into the silence that the human left behind.